So shalom. Thank you for having me. I'm glad that we got a chance to chat, and I'm excited that 12 years later, Lotan's Way is still going on. And my heart is with you, and I wish I were there with you, but not being able to be there. This is a video world these days, and so we're doing this by video. So thank you for asking me all these questions, Altman, about PTSD and adventure therapy. And so I've put together a small PowerPoint here that I'm going to go through. This is going to be a short talk and a summary that I hope leads to some questions and a discussion we can have in a few minutes here. But I've framed this around questions that you suggested that we take a look at. And I'm going to begin here with the idea of PTSD trauma. So we all know about and hear about the result of PTSD for people who are in combat situations or victims of terrorism. But there are many other ways in which people get traumatized, and these are some of them. When it comes to looking at PTSD and studies and treatments, for the most part, we know about that, at least in America, from military experience, because upwards of 25% of soldiers who were in either Afghanistan or Iraq have been estimated to have PTSD. And in America, many PTSD treatments are offered within veterans hospitals. In fact, if you want to know what's going on here and you want a good resource, you can go to ptsd.va.gov, and that's the National Center for PTSD in America. And it's not surprising that PTSD is within the VA system. So much of what I'm going to talk about involves veterans. And one of the questions is, how do we screen people if they haven't been formally screened? If we don't know whether or not there really are PTSD symptoms, this little 5 questionnaire, I think, is a very easy one. And you can ask it verbally of people, or you could have them fill this out. But assuming that someone has experienced a traumatic event, then the question is, have they had repeated nightmares or intrusive thoughts about the events that occurred to them when they didn't want to? And did they try to block out those thoughts or experiences, and their attempts to block them out are unsuccessful? So oftentimes what happens, as many of you know, is that you try to block them out, and then there'll be some trigger event that brings it all back and very real. Oftentimes people are on guard. We call it being vigilant, watchful, easily startled. It might just be a car backfiring on a street. It might be the way someone looks as you're walking down the street, or being dark outside, or many other things. Another symptom is feeling numb, detached, or isolated from people or activities or their surroundings. And the way in which I like to express that is feeling like you're standing on the sidewalk watching a parade rather than being in the street and participating in the parade, feeling like you're in the outskirts of your own life. And finally, a sense of guilt or self-blame for events or problems that may have been caused. In addition, for PTSD, the symptoms need to last for more than 3 months, and they need to affect some important area of your functioning. So these, I think, is a very easy questionnaire that you may want to ask people to see if they're appropriate for a PTSD program in the event that they haven't been formally assessed. One of the other questions that you asked, Altman, is, do we have some easy things to measure for our PTSD programs? like your surfing program or sailing program. And so I have a few suggestions here for you. One of them is the PHQ-9, which in 9 questions asks people questions about depression and anxiety. And you can see in the gray areas here, problem areas. And so this is pretty easy to administer. It can be repeatedly administered week after week or month after month. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there is a reference to a Hebrew version of this scale. And so if you go to that site, then you can easily get a copy of this in Hebrew. Another questionnaire, which is the formal one, is called the PCL-5. It's the post-traumatic stress checklist, and it's consistent with the diagnostic manual, the 5th edition of the Psychiatric Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It essentially goes into more detail than those 5 basic questions that we asked in the screening questionnaire, and you can repeatedly administer this as well. The importance of this, I think, is that if we have a PTSD program and we want to measure our success, then we should be asking PTSD-related questions. That is, our measures should be consistent with the goals of the program. Unfortunately, many studies don't do that. They look at other measures like self-esteem. And I'm not saying that self-esteem isn't important, but if the program is for PTSD, then we should be asking PTSD questions. At the bottom of this screen is a reference to an article. And the article discusses a Hebrew version of this scale, but it's not included in the article. And the US National PTSD Center, although they have many translations of this, they don't have a Hebrew version. But I've written to the 2 major authors here and asked them if they would send it to me. I've not got it yet, but as soon as I do, I'll send it to Altman. And so that will be available to you so that people can do this. Finally, and there's no scale for this that's appropriate, asking questions about how they're functioning in life. Their alcohol use, for example, their relationship with any partners that they have or loved ones, their ability to work, to carry on their daily affairs, whether or not they've been in trouble or get along with neighbors. There are all kinds of functioning questions that I think we should be measuring. And that's more of a qualitative measure to see how people's lives are going as a result of programs like your surfing or sailing program or your desert trips. Do you feel more support? Are you able to talk more about what happened to you? Are you able to offer support to the people you care about or the people in your program? Are good functional measures. So another question is, what does the data show about what works and what doesn't work for PTSD? Well, this is data and conclusions from that National PTSD Center. Psychotherapies, there's plenty of evidence that psychotherapies work and that certain medications work. So in terms of medications, people should not be getting diazepines, the benzos like Xanax, for example, because they tend to be very addictive. But antidepressants seem like they work pretty well. But even then, if you look at the data about what percentage of people get better so that they no longer meet the criteria for PTSD after these treatments, at best, only half of the people do. So about 53 out of 100 people who get psychological therapies will get rid of their PTSD symptoms, at least the major ones, and with medication, even less. One of the big issues, though, is that people tend to drop out of therapy, and they especially stop taking medication. So, and for many people, treatment is not really an option for them because for whatever reason, they don't want to be a part of a hospital program, or they don't want to talk about their issues. But groups really are better than no treatment. And there are even some phone apps. And if you go to that PTSD site, you'll see that there are some phone apps that people can use that are better than nothing. In terms of what we do, running outdoor programs, they're lumped together in this category of complementary and alternative medicine. Well, it's not really medicine. And the best they can do is that they say it looks promising, but it's not recommended. But I have a different conclusion that I'll come to here. So here are a few of the PTSD procedures that are accepted and you can find in hospitals or clinics with qualified people. Cognitive processing therapy, prolonged exposure, eye movement. And if you go to the VA center that's referenced at the bottom, you can learn more about it, although many of you probably know about these treatments anyway. So here are their suggestions that I've just repeated for you. So let's talk about some programs that really look ideal in terms of outdoor therapies here. One notable one that's been published pretty recently is involved surfing for veterans in San Diego, and it's in affiliation with the VA hospital and the psychology clinic at the VA hospital. That's Veterans Administration, Veterans Hospital in San Diego. It's based primarily on Dr. Otis, whose name is he's the first author on the second reference at the bottom here. He did this study as part of his doctoral thesis in psychology and has gone on to be in the military and at the VA hospital in San Diego, and has instituted the surfing program. They've collected data, as you'll be able to see if you want to go to either of those references, but it really only involves 74 active duty sailors, and it's been a 6-week longitudinal study. This is a quote of their conclusion here, and that is, as a complementary intervention, surf therapy may improve depression, anxiety, and PTSD symptoms with potentially unique benefits on mood, on affect. I note that they're cautious about their conclusions. But let's talk about how these things fit together. Because if we look at veterans programs for PTSD, they might involve, as Altman and I were just talking about, hiking the Pacific Coast Trail or the Appalachian Trail in America, which take 3 or 4 months to do. They could involve a 1-day course on a climbing wall, or it could involve learning how to sea kayak in the Everglades. It could involve mountaineering in Colorado or mountain biking on our local mountain bike trail. And so it's very hard to know what a therapy program is and whether it's an isolated program or whether it's an integrated program. In America, we have the Sierra Club, which is a citizen organization, nonprofit, where people are concerned about the environment. And there are programs for veterans. I've been doing sea kayaking courses they're primarily veterans who are now in the Coast Guard Auxiliary. That's a volunteer part of the Coast Guard. And they come here to Dayton, Ohio, where I live, and we do a week of training for them so they can go back home and teach kayaking to citizens in their own communities. The distinction between what's really therapy and what's therapeutic, that is what's helpful, is a difficult one. Here's my concern. It's very hard to compare them if we don't have control groups, and it's very hard to compare them if we don't really know what went into the program. So if I say I have a kayak program for PTSD veterans, you really don't know what that means. You don't know how long it is. You don't know what their symptoms were like. If I don't have measures, if I don't have a control group or look at them long term, it might just be a fun day, which might be fine, but maybe it's not treatment for PTSD. So here are my thoughts about that. And here's my summary, and it's based on a few articles about some reviews that we've written on outdoor programs for PTSD veterans, and you can find either of those. But one of them is we need to look at long-term programs, long-term studies that involve more than just the local community. So what I do in Dayton, Ohio should be compared to what other people do in other communities or perhaps in other countries, or perhaps the surfing program in San Diego, California needs to be compared to and included with the surfing program that you have in Israel. Secondly, we need to have comparison groups. We need to have control groups. The San Diego program does not have control groups. They just look to see how people do at the beginning and during and at the end of a 6-week program, or perhaps a month later. Well, I think that we would all do well. I'd be happy to take your surfing class. For me, it would be a swimming class and not a surfing class. And I would feel great about that, I'm sure. Is it really treatment? I don't know. We need to have a comparison group. We need to look at symptoms. And I don't mean to be critical of what it is that we do, because I am very enthusiastic about the outdoor things that we do. As a psychologist, I'm also very concerned about good treatments for people who are in need. And PTSD is a very serious issue. Suicide rates are very high. All kinds of problems are a result. And I don't want a program to say that it's treatment for PTSD if it's a 3-day program that involves climbing on the local wall. People and veterans specifically need more than that. We need some kind of manual or organization or standardization of what we need by our wilderness experiences. That is, if there's a trip in the desert, can we talk about what went into your trip and how did you screen people? And what did you do for treatment? And when you debrief the day's events, what did you ask? How did people respond to it? Did you have a leader of the day? Did you have someone who learned about reading maps if they didn't know about it beforehand? And then this question of, is this the primary treatment? Is surfing in San Diego for veterans the primary treatment? Well, unfortunately, for half of those 74 people, they were not involved in any other treatment. Or should it be an adjunct or complementary to more formal treatment? And my recommendation is that we look at a continuum of care so that whatever people need, those services are all inclusive for them. So that if they need medication, it's offered. And we don't just treat people in clinics, we also bring them outdoors and introduce them to their colleagues so that they get the support they need. And we get them to have more active lifestyles, because we know that depression tends to make people sedentary in their lifestyles. And so I think that we have a whole range of things that are interconnected. We have networks for people so that the networks serve their needs. So this is pretty much my conclusion about what we need to do. And unfortunately, it doesn't answer some of the questions, like what would be the the best practices that we can follow. I think San Diego is a great example of a good program that's in its very infancy. It's in its very beginning stages, because they need to supplement it with more measures and control groups and look longer and help the people who are not getting seen in a clinic, get them seen if they want to be seen. So I think that there's a lot that we have to offer, and unfortunately it's not well integrated into other models, like more medical models or traditional models. But I'd like to see more integration and for us to continue on our search for ways of measuring what we do and having effective treatments. I hope this has answered a few of your concerns, and I'm going to open this up so that Altman can now pin me down with all the things I haven't mentioned.
So, first of all, thank you very much. We didn't do the introduction, so we were part of Lotan's Way, the first and the initiating the conference. So it's great to see you again, and thank you. And I think you are talking about a level that I would love to get to. So I believe, like, in, of course, the surfing stuff, and we do it for 2 years and meeting people once a week, but we don't have any control group, and we're really based on our senses, and so there's a lot to learn. Actually, it's a challenge.
I'm involved in a program that's in the capital of Ohio, Columbus, and it's on a lake, and it is for people who, it's an adaptive sports program. And so primarily we work with kids who might be in wheelchairs, and we work to get them out of their wheelchairs and into kayaks, and we go out on trips on the lake. Or there's a skiing program that's just ending now as we're getting into spring, where we have adaptive ski equipment for them. Veterans groups come down to this program. It's called the Adaptive Sports Coalition, for sailing classes. And then they get to go out on the lake in their sailboats, and they learn how to captain their boats. We collect no data. We don't have any documentation on what we do. And it's very small compared to your program, Altman, for sailing in Israel. But we have no way of sharing information or knowing how effective it is. It's kind of like we offer the opportunity, and whoever shows up can take advantage of it, which is great. It's a wonderful service. It doesn't cost anything. We have some grants. But if we're going to build this field, we need more. In terms of just reaching out, I think that our hearts are open. But if we're going to make this a professional field, I think we need to keep working around areas like you might see here on the screen.
So if I talk about like a wilderness program in the Negev, in the south of Israel, as you visited, and so recommend that people would be part of a continuum care, and there'll be a control group beside, and for how long, how many days, or what is the level of the challenge or hiking? What do you think?
So that's a great question. It's the kind of trip I would love to be on, long as it's not too hard, long as you don't push me too hard. So one of the ways you can have a control group is there's a limited number of people you can take. And so you're going to have a waiting list. So that waiting list could be your control group. Everybody has the same symptoms. Some people get picked maybe randomly to be on the trip now, and some people maybe in 3 months. I would say, let's talk to the people who run the program now and ask them how long it should be. Based on their experience, how long do they think the program could go on for? When I've done wilderness trips for kids in hospitals or kids in counseling, we've tended to make them a week to 10 days long. And that seems to be a good length of time for me, because it takes a few days for people to warm up, and it takes a few days to kind of process things at the end. And then you've got hopefully 4 or 5 days in between where everybody's in a rhythm. But that's just my sense of it. We need some place to start. And then once we start, maybe you try out that program and compare it to a program that might be 2 weeks or a month long. And then maybe, sorry.
No, we do have short programs like 5 days here in Israel, like PTSD related, not and it works in a very structured way. It's not really wilderness. It's like a more than outdoor training, and it's not therapy. It's like more psychoeducation, group dynamics.
So that would be wonderful too. If we could take the same measures, and we know that these are people who have PTSD, then maybe that's what we offer. We don't have to fix their PTSD, because this is just my personal sense, is that there's no way that you can wipe out a traumatic experience with some therapy. That whatever they went through is with them for life. And so if we do kayaking or go out to the desert, it might ease things a little bit. They might learn some more coping skills, but it doesn't change, and they don't forget. So I'm perfectly okay with psychoeducational material. If veterans want to come and learn how to kayak for a day at the Center for Adaptive Sports, that's wonderful. And if they'll come back, that would be wonderful too. So I'm okay if that's what the program is designed for. I don't know that I've answered this at all.
No, it's okay. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about, you okay with the time?
I'm good with the time. If this is the end of our time, I'm good with that too.
Okay. I was thinking about, that like sometimes in the wilderness, or if I see in surfing, that like you've got the flow sensation, and you are in the moment. It's here and now, and I think it's a therapeutic.
So one of the programs that I've always admired that you've done, Altman, and that we talked about 12 years ago, that has never left me, was you're taking some veterans who planned out their sailing trip to Cyprus, I think.
To Cyprus, to Greece now.
So when you get a group of veterans who learn again how to be part of a team and share their secrets and share their feelings and work together with a common goal, that touches my heart. Because I think that's exactly the way it needs to be, where people get together and they plan out their experience and they experience it again, and they have some sense that they're whole people, they're not broken, and that they can do amazing things together and feel free again and loved and supported. So the beauty of your program is one that I have always admired, and I think is absolutely a landmark experience.
You make me proud.
You should be
Thank
proud.
you. No, it's okay. It's okay. I didn't mean to, but thank you. Okay.
So I hope to come back at some point. I'd love to participate again. Hopefully this pandemic will be over at some point, and we'll all be able to sit around the same table, eating together, drinking wine, and talking.
Yeah, looking forward.
Me too. So thank you very much for this time, and I'm going to stop our recording.